Across America, you're listening to the Veterans Impact Show, featuring stories of veterans who continue the mission in their communities with honor, courage, and commitment. Brought to you by Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Well, welcome aboard. You're with us on this absolutely wonderful weekend. And Facebook, thank you for joining us. This is a great Memorial Day weekend. I want to introduce and just let everybody know, I know the greatest Marine in North Texas. Chuck Wright, welcome aboard.
Now I'm down to just North Texas.
Okay.
I used to be the greatest Marine you knew. Now I'm just in North Texas.
Well, you are
There's always a caveat.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what. The Veterans Impact Show is also involved with Carry the Load Memorial Day. If you want to, go to carrytheload.com or .org and join us. Join us. We are here for you, and we're doing the Lawless March on tomorrow afternoon.
Starts tomorrow afternoon?
Yeah. And so we're going to be there
Go
from
through Monday?
12 to 3. Well, I'm not walking the whole time.
Nope.
I'm 75 years old, and I can outwalk my wife, but not out there. Not everybody else can. All right. Hey, all things aside, Chuck, you and I have been doing this. This is our 8th year.
Wow.
We started it together, and you have been an inspiration for me. And when we first got started in 2015, you set up for us to participate and go to Carry the Load, and was one of the wettest Memorial Day weekends this part of the state has ever seen. It was incredible. But it was
a muddy mosh pit down there.
Yeah, it was one of the memories that I have of Memorial Day that sticks, because it was such a wonderful thing to participate in, and a great opportunity, and to get to know you and your wife and your son Travis. That was one of my greatest memories. So I wanted to ask you, go back in your childhood, go back in your life, because your father was career military.
Yep.
My grandfather was career military. Tell me about some of your greatest memories of Memorial Day weekend.
So I'm going to take a step back. We kind of changed the schedule. So let's talk just for a second about what Memorial Day is. And it may be the most sacred of all of our holidays. And for those that are listening that don't know, Memorial Day is the day we honor those who have given their last full measure of devotion in duty to our nation. It is different from Veterans Day, where we honor all veterans and everybody who has served. And it traces its roots all the way back to just after the Civil War was called Decoration Day. It was called Decoration Day because people would go on this day, and it didn't really start formally as somebody saying, this is going to be the day we do this, but people would go out and decorate the graves of their Civil War fallen family members. And this was not a Union thing or a Southern thing, although it became more formal on the Union side. But both sides did this to honor the sacrifice of those people. And slowly it evolved. We picked a particular day to do this and make it a national holiday. And one thing you will hear a lot of veterans say, most people think of Memorial Day weekend, it used to be the Indy 500, now that's Coca-Cola 600. But they think of car races, and they think of outdoor barbecues, and they think of everything else but what Memorial Day is all about. And we're not asking to change any of that. We don't want you not to have a good time, spend it with family, kick off the summer. But we're asking you to take just a few minutes and think about how we got here, why we got here. I know we've got problems. I know everything isn't perfect. We are dealing with, in the last 30 days, 2 very troubled young men took the lives of a lot of people in Uvalde, Texas. The cruelty was he took the lives of small kids. And those are problems that we can address. Memorial Day, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, really, with Carry the Load. These are times to bring us back together. This was an incredible tragedy, and I'm not going to get into the whole debate about guns and all that. There are some common denominators with all of that. People say mental illness, and I can understand that's kind of a blanket term. But both of these young men were bullied. Both of these young men felt like they were outcasts. These are common denominators, and quite frankly, common denominators. This is how terrorists recruit people, is they find people that are ostracized. This is a time to come together. Yeah, this country has problems, but this remains the greatest country on the planet. And those men and women who gave their last full measure of devotion are worthy of being remembered. And that's what we're asking you to do. Think about what brings us together, not what drives us apart.
I think that is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I remember as a child getting together with my grandparents or my family on a Memorial Day weekend, and they would talk about their experiences. My grandfather would talk about being in some of the battles in the Pacific, because he was in the Navy. That was terrible. My father, his experiences. My uncle John, who was at the Battle of the Bulge with the 82nd. All of these men had lived through so much of World War II. And now my generation, we look back on Vietnam. I lost 12 pilots in Vietnam, in the air war over North Vietnam. And I had 5 POWs as well, including Dave Carey and John McCain. And Stockdale was flying one of my planes. He was Sec CAG of our group. So I think about those people, but I think about all of the men and women who have served that I have known and how they influenced my life.
And absolutely, and I think about Admiral Stockdale, and an incredible individual, and very much a Renaissance man.
Very much.
You had a different experience than I did. I'm an Air Force brat. My dad was in the Air Force. I was a junior in high school when he finally retired. My mother still lives in the only house they ever owned. If we weren't renting right off base, we were living in on-base housing my whole life. Except for the year he went unaccompanied, which means he didn't get to take his family with him to Korea for a year. And we lived off base in an apartment, and we had to walk to school onto the base every morning, which was, that was my, walking to school uphill both ways in the snow every day, which never snowed in San Antonio. So that was kind of silly part of the story. But that generation of men were very stoic for the most part. It was the era of John Wayne. It was the era of Gary Cooper. These were our male heroes, and they didn't talk about their feelings. I have my uncle, technically he's a cousin, but uncle made sense because of the age gap, who was at Iwo Jima. Never told a story about Iwo Jima. He was with the 3rd Marine Air Wing there. I've got a couple pictures. I didn't find out about this until his last year of life. And it was a little bit shocking. I do remember, and I'll tell this story because it definitely applies to Memorial Day. We're in a military school. We were at Kadena Air Force Base.
Oh, yeah, in Japan.
No, Okinawa. Actually in Okinawa.
Oh, I thought Kadena. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Been there, but done that, both.
Been there both. Oop.
All right.
Nathaniel doesn't like what I'm saying, so he's muting me. My wife just texted and said, "Hey, Nathaniel, can you tell me how to do that at home?" So, but a story, and you've heard this story. I've told this story before, but I think it's appropriate when we talk about it, Memorial Day. It was a very solemn day for us. There wasn't a lot of celebrating. There certainly wasn't a lot of discussion about it. But when you're a kid in an Air Force base in the middle of the Vietnam War, usually when somebody gets called out of class, you're in trouble, all this stuff, we didn't. Because it happened that you never saw that kid again. That kid's father had been killed, had been shot down, whatever the case may. I had classmates when we were at Randolph. So I even went to school at Randolph on a military base. When we came back to Texas, the last two school districts defined by the boundaries of a military base are Randolph and Cole, which is Fort Sam Houston. And we were big rivals in football and everything else because that was the Army school and we were the Air Force school. But yeah, it was a very, very different. And as young people, we were very cognizant of the fact that our fathers, a lot of our fathers, were at risk. I do remember, so Kadena was where the SR-71s took off from. I never saw one, but we certainly heard them. They would normally take off just before dawn or just right at dusk because they didn't want anybody to see them. And they called them blackbirds for a reason. So we heard them, we never saw them, but they also is where the big KC-135 refuelers were. And I can remember absolutely horrific accident. One KC-35 didn't have enough power, and it hit. There's a point where you've got no choice but to try to take off because you've run out of runway, and he started to lift up and just didn't make it and came crashing down right across the highway. He took out two cars with local Japanese citizens in it, killed the entire crew, which was 10 or 14. I don't remember exactly how many. And I remember this, it was incredibly still that day, and the fire from that wreckage climbed, they said it climbed 15,000 feet in the air, and it literally went straight up. There was no breeze at all. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. But being 8, 9 years old and contemplating, oh my Lord, that's 10, 14 fathers that are not coming home for dinner tonight. Mm-hmm. And it really was. It hits you differently. And it's one of the reasons, and this is probably a good point to segue. And there is a YouTube video, and it's Carry the Load, Clint Bruce, who was the founder of Carry the Load, along with and Clint Bruce is a very interesting individual. For our regular listeners, we had Junior Ortiz on recently, who was one of the assistant football coaches at the Naval Academy. Well, I didn't know this. Clint Bruce and Stephen Holly knew each other from playing football. They were both Navy SEALs, but they both played football at the Naval Academy. And that's the very top one if you see it. And we won't run it right now. It's about 3 minutes long. But it is so powerful because Clint talks about it was Memorial Day, and he went on, he loaded up a bunch of weight in the back of his pack, and he went on we call it ruck marching, but basically just went on a march and just trying to work out the pain. And as he says, good pain drives out bad pain. And he was carrying all of those guys that he lost in Iraq and Afghanistan, because he lost more than a few. And it's a great story because he meets a World War II veteran, and I won't spoil that part of the story because, at least to me, if you watch it, it tells the real story of Carry the Load. But it started a movement, and I'm hearing the music. We're going to take a little bit of a break. We'll talk a little bit about the movement and restoring the true meaning of Memorial Day when we come back. For our radio fans, for our Facebook fans, we'll be continuing in just a second, so hang with us.
Yeah, it's important that we keep this conversation going on Facebook. This is the Memorial Day weekend, and Chuck, thank you for that. Let's go deeper when we come back. Again, you're listening to the Veterans Impact Show. We're here for veterans. We're here to help you. We'll be right back after these words from all of our partners, and then stay with us on Facebook. We were talking about that and what had happened on Okinawa. That was one of the most beautiful places I'd ever been.
Yeah, it is extremely pretty. It was interesting enough, I learned, they say that D-Day was the largest amphibious invasion ever. Actually, it was Okinawa. It was also one of the bloodiest fights in World War II. And so there has been debate that some people say the Japanese would have eventually surrendered. I doubt it. And let me tell you why. Because their fighting on Okinawa, as ferocious as the fighting was all the way across the Pacific, as we did our island hopping campaign, the fighting on Okinawa was even worse. The Japanese were dug in deeper. They were not going to surrender.
That is, Okinawa was considered part of Japan, part of their homeland.
It is.
And basically, their mentality, we don't understand. Now, I've been there quite a few times. You've been there. And it's a different world. It's a different mentality. So you can't put our yardstick of our culture or our beliefs today against the yardstick of what it was then for those people.
And it's interesting to go just a little bit esoteric on you. That is one of our biggest problems when we consider foreign policy, is we don't put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And it's odd with all of this talk about diversity, and we'll not go down that, where you're trying to understand somebody else. We do foreign policy as if everybody thinks like we do, and they don't. Their experience were very different. Don't
you think, though, that was part of the problem in Vietnam? We didn't understand the history. We didn't understand the people. And there were cultural things going on with different religions. There were cultural things going on from a historical standpoint that had happened to Vietnam. We didn't understand any of it.
Well, and the same thing with, sorry for our Facebook watchers, Diane's overplaying with the lights, trying to be our assistant producer, and she just turned the lights out on us.
Now she's making faces at learning how to mute you, and Diane trying to put us in the dark.
Yeah, I think they're sending us a message.
Yeah,
but let's take that to Korea as well. In fact, culturally, this was, and it was odd that it came at the end of MacArthur's probably most brilliant tactical move, which was the landing at Incheon. But then splitting his forces on either side of the Chosin Reservoir was his biggest tactical blunder, and then ignoring the evidence the Chinese were coming in force. Had he known that, had he accepted that, had he realized the Chinese would do this, because we were instantly outnumbered 5 or 8 to 1. The numbers were staggering. And they literally ran bodies at us. And this is another thing. Nobody was ready for cultures that didn't respect human life and would literally, hey, you've got 1 million guys, I've got 10 million guys, I'm going to run guys at you until you run out of bullets. Logic.
Yeah, here we go. All right, we're going to be back on terrestrial radio. We're so thankful. Stay with us on Facebook, and we welcome back to radio. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. Well, I'm Jim Blight, U.S. Navy veteran, Vietnam veteran, made 3 trips over there, and joining me, the incredible Chuck Wright, a Marine who absolutely typifies the movement continue. So, Chuck, we were continuing the conversation.
Let's continue the mission.
Continue the mission. Oh, okay.
Charlie Mike, which is the motto of our show.
Continue the
Jim
conversation.
Gets confused sometimes.
Yeah, but let's go back, because what you were saying was so profound in many cases.
And that is unusual, so pay close attention. This is a red letter show. But no, we were talking about the problem we have is that we assume all cultures are the same. But let's talk about something that people don't understand about Memorial Day or about and I'm going to talk about the military. And I don't share a lot of my own stories just because I find everybody else's stories a lot more interesting. But one of the things that struck me is the military is a very dangerous place to be. We do high-speed stuff. It is a dangerous environment. Even if we're not shooting at somebody, I showed up at flight school, and one of the first duties that I drew is we took a platoon of officers out. There had been a young man whose wife was from Pensacola, and the old joke about show up at Pensacola, get your wings, pick up your Pensacola wife was very true. The girls down there were incredibly cute, and it was true. But this young man it was nighttime refueling behind a C-130, the Marine refuelers, and his F-4 for some reason banked into another F-4. There were two of them refueling at the same time. They banked into each other instead of away. I have no idea whose fault it was. It didn't really matter, but I am standing out, and it's the middle of June, and it's northwest Florida, which is where Pensacola is. Beautiful beaches, but it's hot and humid. It rivals Houston for humidity, and we're in dress blues, and we were absolutely miserable. And I share that part of it. I'm going to tell a quick leadership story as well. But we were out for that young man, and it struck me. I had just started my military career, and I'm like, this is some scary stuff. We make mistakes, people die. And that is part of what Memorial Day is about. That young man is honored on Memorial Day. One of these days I'm going to learn his name. We never did get his name. But I tell the story about the heat for one reason. So obviously we're miserable. Dress blues are very thick, very heavy uniforms. Normally they were winter uniforms. I'm glad that the Marine Corps went to them all the time. I hated our whites. They looked like ice cream salesmen uniforms.
You should have tried to wear the Navy whites.
No,
it was awful.
One of the reasons I wouldn't go in the Navy.
Dirt 3 miles away.
Yeah, absolutely. Every piece of dirt came flying in. But we get on the bus. It's not an air-conditioned bus. It's literally a school bus from the base at Pensacola. And we get on the bus, and there was a major who was the officer in charge of this platoon, and you could cut the tension with a knife. And nobody wanted to say anything. I mean, some poor family. We're watching this beautiful family that has lost a loved one, and they're just absolutely hurting, and you're completely empathetic, and you don't want to say anything. But man, if somebody had said the wrong thing, fights would have broken out. And this major got on the bus and said, "Gentlemen, we're all miserable. It's hot. It was a terrible duty that we had to do, but you guys did it well, and I thank you for that. But I want to remind you of one thing. God forbid anything happens to you, there will be a platoon of Marine officers for your family." I thought it felt like walking in to a walk-in freezer. The heat just left. The mood completely changed. Very quiet ride back. But that is the essence of Memorial Day, which is what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And I think it's important. You were talking about the cultural differences, and we talked about Japan, Vietnam. But I do want to mention one thing. The Marshall Plan, the things that were done to restore Germany and Japan, we changed the hearts and minds of people with great values, and we built up. Those are two of our greatest allies today. As a result of not saying our values are bad compared to your values, or you should have our values versus that, but when we exhibit those most important values, those Christian values, it changes hearts and minds of people.
People don't understand, and I'm not going to go too religious on this, but this country was founded on Judeo-Christian values, but it was also founded on the idea of we the people. That's why it's so important. For the first time in history, a country was established by the people with a republic, not with a dictator or a king or a fascist leader or whatever. Kind of going off on a little bit of a political tangent, but it is important. I will say this very quickly. There is a great book. It's called The President's Club, and it's really interesting because it deals with presidents and their relationship. It deals with presidents who have stepped down from, either been, termed out or whatever happened, and their relationship with the current president. And you were talking about the Marshall Plan, but it really ought to be the Woodrow Wilson plan. Because Harry Truman and Woodrow Wilson were serious political rivals. They did not like each other. But after World War I, Woodrow Wilson had put a plan in place that helped Europe get back on its feet. Now, keep in mind, World War to the level of destruction in World War II, when you grasp the magnitude of millions and millions and millions and millions of people, tens of millions of people, with no food, with no shelter, with nothing, literally nothing. You look at some of the old footage, these cities were absolutely destroyed.
You mean like what's going on in Ukraine?
Very much like what's going on in the Ukraine on a micro level. And you look at what Woodrow Wilson and Truman and the Marshall Plan did to rebuild those nations. But the other thing that we were talking about is we introduce them to self-governance. Mm-hmm. And it is really, and after World War II, it became a very big deal. Korea and Vietnam were fought to stop the spread of communism. And a lot of people lose sight of that. People say, Korea is the forgotten war. Vietnam was supposedly the unimportant war. No, it was very important. Because today, Thailand self-governs itself. The Philippines self-govern themselves. Malaysia self-governs themselves. And it's not perfect. I'm going to quote Churchill, because I love Churchill. He was a great guy. Smoked cigars every day.
Drank whiskey, too.
Drank whiskey. You got to like that about him. But he said democracy is the worst form of government on the planet, except all the others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me a better document than our Constitution. And that is what these men and women gave their lives for, is literally, when you say our way of life, it really is. We get to pick. Yeah. 2 years ago, we made a bad pick. Yeah. I know some of you anti-Trumpers didn't like that remark, but let's face it, we're not doing very well. The country's not going in the right direction. And there are bad things happening. But it's still...
I think, though, that we can change that and we can come together. It's all about, I believe, it's all about working together and coming together, not calling names, not standing up screaming, calling names, not disrupting, not, I've got to have my agenda and disrupt everybody else. Yep. Let's focus on how do we work together. We've got to do a lot of important things, not just one thing.
Well, you know what? Let's start with one thing.
Well,
let's start with, where are we? Are we about to go into the break?
Oh. We're about 15 seconds. So tell you what, Facebook,
we'll do that
thank you
after the break.
for joining us, Chuck and I, on this. And I want to say Happy Memorial Day is not a good thing. Have a good Memorial Day, and remember. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. Well, guys, I got to tell you, this is a holiday that I look forward to every year because it's a chance to get together with so many of my brothers and sisters. And I think that's important. And Chuck, when you and I started this 15 years ago, it was a huge thing to participate and carry the load. And I think that's been a very important part. And this is a culture, this is an event that is spread throughout the United States. It's not just a Dallas event. It's now a coast-to-coast event. And thank you for introducing me to it many years ago. It's important, too, that we think about those that we've lost. I lost 12 in Vietnam. as well as 5 POWs. And Dave Carey and I are very close friends today, even to this day. And I, can't imagine what it must have been like to be a POW. Is he's probably thinking back about those men who he lost in Hanoi, and it was a terrible situation. I think it's important too that we think about the family that went before us, like my grandfather and my father and my uncles who all served, and how they influenced. They're gone. They're not gone because of dying in battle, but they're gone. Yet I want that legacy to live on.
Well, one of the ways we keep that legacy alive is we keep their memories alive. We keep their names alive. So we'll talk about, as we get further into the year, our end of the year program, which is Reads Across America, where we literally say those names out loud, because they say that every man dies 2 deaths, when he actually dies and when the last person says his name aloud. So we want to keep those people who served alive, and we're going to pivot this into, we were talking about Carry the Load earlier. We're going to talk more about Carry the Load. And one of the reasons Carry the Load is so important for me is that every Marine a Marine officer starts with what is called the basic school. We've already gone through our own version of boot camp. It's called OCS. Interestingly enough, from guys who've done both, it's actually more physically, although from an athletic standpoint, demanding, because I was shocked how many. I actually hadn't thought about it. One of the guys brought it up to me. He says, "Yeah, I always wondered why you officers were all such a bunch of damn jocks." And I was like, "Okay, why?" He says, "Because you're all a bunch of damn jocks." I mean, we had guys who'd played. In fact, one of the guys that I honor was an honorable mention, small college All-American, just a great individual. But we kind of lost my train of thought there. 2 of my classmates were lost in the line of duty. Would you throw up the Woolly Bear slide? So this is Woolly Bear, First Lieutenant Don Willett, my roommate at basic school. We don't have the slide up, but the other was Lieutenant Colonel Keith Sweeney. And I focus on Don more just because Keith's legacy is so incredible. He left a son and a daughter. They both graduated from University of Virginia, UVA, a very prestigious academic school. Keith was killed in a V-22 crash. Michael, his son, is now a V-22 pilot. I can think of no better legacy. His daughter was a cheerleader at UVA, and I think she's now married with a family. I need to reach out to them. But Woolly Bear was this really incredible young man. He was a little on the shy side. But he was the guy, and got this story from his company commander. They had a Christmas party before they deployed, and she said that her dad talked about the fact that everybody else left and Woolly Bear hung around on Christmas Eve to help Dad put toys together for the kids. And that was just the kind of man Woolly Bear was. He was pretty incredible. There's a tribute to him. He was a Naval Academy grad, and there's a tribute to him. They have a page that I stumbled onto, and I read some of the comments about Woolly Bear, and I was sad that I was like, there are parts of Woolly Bear I didn't get to know, even though we lived together for 6 months. Just an absolutely great guy. And what Carry the Load has allowed me to do, and so this is one example of over 500 placards that will be down at River Shawn Park, and we'll drill into Carry the Load here a little bit. We're going to be down. Come down tomorrow if you want to join us in Dallas. River Shawn Park is near downtown Dallas. We take over the whole park. It's wonderful. They have placards set up, and it's the stories of about 500 individuals who've made that ultimate sacrifice. And they have added they've added first responders, which I absolutely love. So reaching out to multiple communities, because to me it's green side, blue side, red side. We're very similar in our experiences and in our attitudes, and it's wonderful. But there are 500 stories like this. Now, in my case, I'm sharing Woolly Bear's story, and it's a great story. And if my family has made a commitment, my son has made a commitment, he will continue to honor Woolly Bear. My wife feels like he's part of the family because we want to do everything we can. And, you know, if we get a couple thousand people to buy into that concept, we're going to keep the memories of a lot of these people alive and going. And it's important that we remember where we come from.
Chuck, can I interject? Can I ask a question real quick? Yeah. All right. What a lot of people don't know, and you are very involved with the Gold Star Monument, a lot of people don't know what is a Gold Star family, because that's relevant to what we're talking
Absolutely.
about.
And last night we had a small dedication. So, quick story. I'm going to go off on a small tangent. There was a gentleman. Yeah, I know, I'm bad about that. I'm kind of taking over this show. I didn't really plan to do it that way, but
I did.
So Herschel Woody Williams, is World War II's last surviving Medal of Honor recipient. And he retired as a chief warrant officer from the Marine Corps. Then he went to work for the VA. And when he left the VA, one of the things that had struck him was the sacrifices of our Gold Star families, those who had lost somebody. So Blue Star family is somebody who has somebody who is serving. A Gold Star family is somebody who has had a family member give their last full measure of devotion to our nation. So a little bit different. We had a couple Blue Star family members with us last night. I'm certainly a Blue Star family member, as my nephew is serving right now, as is my baby bro. Yeah, that's right. Diane's son is serving as well. So, grandson. I see. I didn't realize you were that old. I'm trying to suck up so she doesn't delete me again. Turn out the lights on me. I have my serious side. It's this one over here. And I pointed to my left side for everybody on radio. Sorry, I keep forgetting we're doing both. So last night we had a dedication. So Woody created a foundation that builds Gold Star family monuments all over the country. And I have been asked to consult on 2 of those. We built one in Frisco. And so people are asking to pick my brain because more and more people are getting them want them in their cities. And then the other project he's doing, he wants to have one on every state capitol grounds. And so I'm going to be trying to find some people to do that in Austin. But we had a small dedication because Frisco has a program, and there were 4 key Gold Star family members on our committee. Several of them were friends of mine before, and a couple of them are new friends who are now almost like family. But we dedicated 4 trees. The city has a program that you can dedicate a tree to somebody. And at the base of the tree, they're going to put a plaque. And the city actually bought bigger trees than they normally buy. They normally buy fairly small trees. They bought bigger trees as they wanted to kind of help us out. And we had that dedication last night. And it was small. We had most of the committee there, and some key people. And we had one city official. Laura, thank you so much for showing up. But it was, to us, a great way to kick off Memorial Day weekend. And those trees are eventually going to shade that monument. And it has grown to mean more and more to me. So kind of off on our tangent. But yeah, the Gold Star families, I want to make sure they're not forgotten, because let me tell you, having watched my sister-in-law raise kids while baby bro made 7 deployments to different sandboxes. He was gone a lot, and she had to raise those kids. I think back, the funniest story I remember growing up, it's not a Memorial Day story, it's actually a Christmas story, but my dad was TDY somewhere, I think it was Japan. He was part of the U2 program at the time. As part of the logistics side of it, he didn't do anything cool like fly or anything, but those guys were actual astronauts, and that was really a cool thing. But he was in Japan. I'm pretty sure he was in Japan or in Okinawa or in Thailand or somewhere. But he wasn't home for Christmas. We were trying to put up the Christmas tree, and it would not stay up. And we had clothesline tied to the curtain railing, the old style curtain railing. We had clothesline trying to keep the tree upright. And it's a funny family story, but it's kind of silly things that military brats remember, and that's kind of what our lives were like. So kind of jumping back to Carry the Load, and let's go to the Carry the Load slide. So we're going to have our event in Rivershawn Park. And when this started, and you can kind of see on the map here, one of the dotted lines are the rally marches, not rally, relay, the relay marches. So when Carry the Load first started out, Clint and Stephen Holly, both being SEALs, both being Naval Academy grads, they got the idea. They started the march at West Point on the Hudson River, and they marched down through Annapolis, got to Atlanta, and took a right and headed to Dallas. Well, other people around the nation said, in fact, it started with our friend Dave Babora, former NFL football player, former Mr. Irrelevant, which is the last player drafted in the NFL draft. He's our Thor lookalike. If you've ever seen a good-looking guy, great family. I'm so pleased to hear that his wife is now cancer-free, a couple of kids, just a great individual. And he actually runs the Adaptive Training Foundation, and they work with our adaptive athletes. And if you want to watch, and you got to watch it all the way to the end, if you want to watch a Doritos commercial that I don't know why they didn't put on the air, type in Doritos Super Bowl ATF, Adaptive Training Foundation. It is an incredible video, but you have to watch it all the way to the end. And of course, I like it because I know several of the guys that are running. Anyway, kind of way off on tangents here. We try to throw in all of these groups and all of these things. But David was responsible because he played for the Seattle Seahawks for a while, getting a march started on the other side of the nation that comes down through Seattle and gets to Texas somehow. I don't know the exact march. But what's cool is people can participate in the relay along the way. So you can walk for 2 miles or 5 miles or whatever it is, but you're a part of this. So this has grown into a national organization. Of course, everybody in the center of the nation was going, hey, we're being left out. So there's a march that starts in Chicago and another march that starts in South Dakota. I think it's South Dakota. And I think now it's set up so they march through all 48 contiguous states. We're working on a march from Hawaii. I'm not sure we're going to get that one worked out. There we go. Yeah, that's an idea. I like that. I'm going to run that up the flagpole with cousin Deb. Deb Wright is the executive director, and I refer to all Wrights as cousins. Regardless of race, color, or creed, we're cousins somehow, some way. And that goes back to your point.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what we have in common, what we share, what binds us together instead of tears us apart, and that's part of Carry the Load. But to everybody who's anywhere near DFW, wants to come down, wants to do something really cool, I promise you this will be one of your most memorable experiences. Join me and about 17,000 of my closest friends as we start our march from Rivershawn Park. We're going to do a lap around Uptown, and then we're going to march up and down Katy Trail, and all up and down Katy Trail. And Katy Trail is part of the Rails to Trails program. If you're not familiar with that, look that up. I'm not going to go into it right now, but it's really cool. But you've got this beautiful, very wide path because it's the width of a railroad track, and it's tree-lined, and it's great. But you're going to see the stories of over 500 individuals, and it's great. Just stop periodically and read them.
It's a beautiful event, and I got to tell you, this is going to be a beautiful weather-wise weekend to do it. Now, we also have some wonderful affiliates throughout California and South Texas and other parts of the nation. Go look at the American Legion. Go look at VFW. Go look for events in your area to participate in, especially down in San Antonio. I would think there is some of the incredible things you guys are doing down there. So this is Jim Blythe and Chuck Wright. We're going to be right back after these words from all of our partners. You're joining us on the Veterans Impact Show. We're glad to be here. We're glad to be part of your Memorial Day weekend. That's okay by me. I think that's great because you got great stories. You mentioned doing a memorial service. I'll never forget wearing dress whites and doing my first memorial service on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier in the Gulf of Tonkin. Let me tell you something. That wasn't easy.
No.
Not easy at all, especially when there was nobody there to other than a ceremonial situation. Right. And we had several. And we had several of those that we went through, that I went through, that the first time I was like, oh my God, you got to put on dress whites and you got to do this because you're not on duty. You're not. Mm-hmm. And from then on, I volunteered. I was always there.
There are
so many.
There are traditions like that in the military that really makes the experience at the time, and every time, whether it was manning the rails, coming in or out of Pearl Harbor, you look back on those changes of command. Used to hate those, but now I'm glad I was part of those experiences because it's part of what binds you as an organization. And going back to what we were talking about before, we need more of that. What do we share in common? What is it that pulls us together instead of tears us apart?
I think that is so important, Chuck, and that is a political statement. Right now, I wish we could get everybody to just sit down and quit focusing on their agenda and promoting themselves, and let's focus on our agenda, making our schools safe. It's not just about guns. It's about mental health. It's about securing the schools. It's about how do we change? How do we change the hearts and minds of people? How do we find, background checks? Well, how do we find these young men who are so isolated, so disenfranchised in the world, and so angry?
One thing that you didn't mention is and almost every one of these, with this going on, I've been doing a lot of reading about this, trying to learn more, trying to understand more. And anger is at the core of most mass shooters. But there is a very different profile from school shooters where the average age is 18 to workplace shooters, which is the next most common form of mass shooters, which leaps all the way up to 43. It's very rare. I don't think there has ever been a school shooter who has been over 30 years old. I think the high was 29. I think. Don't quote me on that. But the point being is they tend to be young people. The word you didn't use was bullied. These kids are being bullied. It's part of them being ostracized. Now, they may be loners, which lends themselves to being bullies. The one thing I'm not hearing is, where are the anti-bullying programs? If we want to talk about diversity.
Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. Thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation and the Texas Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Now, let's continue this conversation. Well, not only welcome back, but we're about to bring this program back into the dock. And I'm Jim Blythe, U.S. Navy veteran, and Chuck Wright, U.S. Marine Corps veteran. We are very active in Carry the Load. We're very active in veterans. What would you say? All of the things that
continuing the mission.
Continuing the mission.
So the motto of the show, when we brought the show back, we kind of split off and did different things. We put the show back together, but one of the things that I wanted to do is, we were going to do this, we wanted to focus on Charlie Mike, continuing the mission. We want to highlight our veterans and our veterans groups that are continuing to make a difference in the community. We're talking about Carry the Load and Memorial Day. I don't think you could create a bigger difference making than what Clint Bruce and Stephen Holly and Deb Wright and Whit Peterman and all the people that are down there. And there's a girl whose name I can never pronounce, who has been great. I get emails from her every week talking about this. This is this group. And as you listen, you're going to hear more and more groups. And in the near future, we're going to talk about the Texas Veterans Commission. We're going to talk about the County Veterans Service Officer Program. We're going to talk about groups like Team Red, White, and Blue, Team Rubicon, Mission Continues, which, continue the mission. It's a variation of that. That's where it came from. We kind of got off onto the tangent of school shootings, but it comes back to this sense of community. And one of the things we've seen with school shooters is they are isolated, they're disconnected, they're ostracized. And it's, how do we help that? And let me point something out. We're seeing a rise in teen suicide in this country, and guess what? All the same common denominators. I say all. Many of the same factors. So the things that we do to try to identify school shooters, and lo and behold, I don't know if you saw this or not, there was another school shooter that they were able to stop down in the valley in Texas.
One of the things that is a common denominator, and I want to go do some research, but I do believe in every case, and I could be wrong, these boys had no father in the home.
I think that's pretty constant. That is one of the major problems in America.
So one of the things we've done, not taking a political stance, but we have basically gotten away from values and created a welfare system that disincentivizes family.
Let's get off the politics, but let's talk about something you're involved with. So there are programs. I work with Bill Davis, who's the CEO of Young Marines. You are involved in Sea Cadets.
Absolutely.
There are programs out there to help connect kids. And they're not, we obviously talk about military programs, but they're not just military programs. One of the boards that I serve on does the administration for AmeriCorps. There are programs out there to try to get kids plugged in because, quite frankly, what you're talking about is one of the reasons for the rise in gangs and gang violence.
Well, the other thing, too, is there are mentorship programs.
Yep.
There are mentorship programs through churches. There are mentorship programs through schools. There are opportunities to be a grandparent, literally, to mentor and help a kid who's struggling in school.
Now, one of the things I'm trying to work on is I'm trying to get more of our transitioning veterans.
I think that's incredible. So, Chuck, why don't we focus as part of our continuing the mission on helping to build some mentor programs to get our veterans into the schools and into helping some of these kids with their learning problems, learning disabilities. Everybody does different. Well, Chuck, we're about to come to the end of this, and we like to close with a prayer. So, Father God, we want to thank you for all you're doing and for this beautiful nation that we're in, the greatest nation on earth. Lord, we thank you for that blessing. We thank you for blessing our active duty military and protect them and watch over them, and for our veterans as well, as we continue the mission together to bring this nation together. In your great name, we say thank you, Lord. Thank you. This we pray. Amen. Chuck, what a great day. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I think we're going to have an incredible deal at Carry the Load. Facebook, share us, join us on YouTube. It's important. Get us out there. And by the way, I want to thank my wife, Diane, for filming Don Graves singing at your golf, and over 1,000 people have shared that. Share us and join us on the Veterans Impact Show. Thank you for being on board.
Cool.